Good morning, Chairman Jones. Can you hear me?
Can you hear me? I'll be back. Now talk about the and since I have sort of guided our meetings according to the Robert's Rules of Disorder, I neglected to ask that we waive the reading of the minutes from the last meeting and approve them. If I could have a motion and a second.
I'll move.
Second. Moves. And we have a second by whom? I'm sorry.
It was Roseanne.
Okay, great. Art and Dan. Any objection? Without objection, we have come back and finished out that piece that I just ran completely over. I apologize for that. So let me share with you a little bit. We were the first task force to organize ourselves. We were the first to meet, and we were the first to submit recommendations to the governing body of the RLC, and I'm proud of that. And I think that speaks to the energy and the foresight of this group that we put together in this task force, because you represent all sectors from all parts of the state. The feedback that I got from members of that commission was very positive. They were pleased with the work that we had done. You know, we prefaced the recommendation with some background information about this industry and how important it is to the state. And that's been posted for anybody to go to and read. And I think that's beneficial to the industry for everybody to understand how important it is, what a huge employer we are in the state, the revenue that's generated for the state in terms of fees, and deciding how we're going to move forward. I think people need to understand that. So the recommendation went up, as you know, to permit gaming to reopen at 50%. The commission was supportive of that, but in discussion with the governor's office and his staff, it was their recommendation that all businesses, not just gaming, but that all businesses reopen at 25% of capacity. I had a discussion with the staff about that. I alerted them to the fact that the American Gaming Association had recommended 35%, but their rationale, I understood, and I absolutely support that rationale. I think the governor's trying to be conservative in getting commerce up and going. This is really just a delicate balance between the risk involved and the benefits. So I'm respectful that, first of all, they're permitting gaming to resume in phase 1. Gaming is not contemplated in the federal plan in phase 1. And I was very concerned that we might have to wait until phase 2, which runs conceivably into June. And many commercial state operations in other states, gaming commercial operations, are going to be opening in June. But I was hopeful that we'd made the case that perhaps we could fall somewhere between phase 1 and phase 2. Well, they're permitting gaming to resume operations beginning on the 18th, next Monday. I understand the challenges that have been added to gaming based on also limiting the number of gaming positions or devices. I've heard from a lot of you. I heard from a lot of you last night, and I've heard from a lot of people today. I just got a message from Senator Johns, who serves ex officio on this, and he's supportive of dropping that device capacity. That's a decision that we did not make a recommendation on that. We left it to capacity of the gaming floor and capped it at we recommended 50%, but I think we all certainly were willing to accept 25%. I know the device cap came as a surprise to many of you yesterday. I did not know with certainty if in fact that would be the plan, but that's the plan as it is now. I believe it's going to create some problems for some businesses to reopen. I acknowledge that. And just for the record, I want to get that information out today so that the industry has had the opportunity to weigh in on those restrictions. So I open it up for your comments. Go ahead, Stan.
Yes, sir. Well, since we've been on the phone, we've received advisory notice from Gaming Enforcement Division, and they're referencing the guidelines that we looked at last that have the social distancing as this committee has discussed it, and it says nothing about device restrictions of 25%. And so is the advisory notice that just came out the update from the governor's office that we're going to go with?
I have not been told since yesterday
Okay.
that it's any different from what they said yesterday.
Yeah, I mean, literally, as you were speaking, it came out from state police, and it says with the direction of Governor Edwards' office, and it's referencing the document that we've been working on. So
I suspect 25% device or position cap is still in place. Obviously, if I get a message while I'm here from someone, the RLC governing body or the governor's staff, I'll pass that along. If I get it after we complete the meeting today, I will pass that along. But I do not believe that that has changed since yesterday. How's that going to affect truck stops, Stan?
Significantly, I think. I think when you're looking at a 50 machine location, I'm assuming we're going to round down, so 12 and a half is 12. I don't think it's going to be every truck stop that's going to open. I've gotten calls from several higher value properties are going to, opening and feel they're going to have the demand for it. I think the medium to lower volume properties have a decision to make. I mean, just economics, just like everybody else on the call has made. I think at the 25% device level, it definitely, you got to go back and run numbers.
Art?
Mr. Chairman, yeah, I totally agree. I think at the 25% of the devices changes the whole plan that we had, and I know others have had in opening. We have one location has 19 machines. Those probably won't be able to open, and it's just not going to be cost effective. There's several others that are going to be right on the wire as to whether or not they're cost effective by the time you have to add all the additional restrictions and requirements and keeping the sanitary levels up and checking temperatures and things like that. You have additional burden and cost, but yet a severe restriction on the number of devices. I mean, I don't know whether in the gyms that are opening, is it 25% of the machines that they have or equipment in the gym, or is it 25% of the occupancy? So, I mean, I don't know if that's just under the same premise, but that I think it's going to be a big hit to a lot of. And then if we talk about restaurants, I know there was some mention that restaurants could, in one of our conversations, machines could go on when restaurants were allowed. If that is the case, if restaurants would be allowed to turn on, if 25% of the 3 machine or 2 machine location presents a problem as well. So,
Trey, did you want to add anything? You there, Trey?
Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
I apologize.
That's okay.
We've had those same discussions. We've kind of analyzed our different properties and figuring out which ones. I mean, our properties range from 35 machines to 50 machines. So, like Arthur said, we have a big decision to make to decide and see if it's even economical for us to open up those locations. So that's kind of, we're in the same boat. We're kind of figuring out what the processes are, what staff we need, and like I said, just to see if it's going to be economical for us to open those locations. So we're still in that, working through that process and figuring out what we should and shouldn't do.
Okay. Go ahead.
Chairman Stanguitos, what was the logic, and I think I'm preaching to the choir when we talk about the social distancing guidelines we had initially established as compared to this 25% device? What was the logic behind that additional restriction?
I sense, I'm not sure what was on the limitation on the number of devices, because that was never part of our discussion. It wasn't part of our recommendation. But I know the governor's staff had that discussion among themselves. And I suspect, and I don't know, and I don't want to speak for the governor and his staff, but I suspect that they were just trying to be very cautious about how many people ended up in a place and how close they were, despite the fact that I think we addressed that.
Right.
And the dilemma for me is that when I'm with you in this task force, I'm representing your interest, right? And I speak for the task force. But when I'm not with you, I'm the regulator, and I'm obliged to uphold the regulations that are in place. And what was conveyed to me yesterday in my role as regulator was there are going to have to be caps not only on occupancy, but on devices. That could change. It hasn't that I'm aware of right now. When we're done today, I will convey the concern of this group up through the RLC, the governing body, and then I'm sure they will convey it to the governor's office. I suspect the governor and his staff have already received calls, and they probably already talked to people. So this isn't some surprise to them that there's some discomfort. Before I wrap that up, I'd like to hear from the casino side. Wade, do you want to start?
Yes, sir. Obviously, we share the same concerns that Stan and Chief Lawson had articulated, that, if we understood the concern they're attempting to address through this 25% position restriction, we might be able to come up with some alternatives. But in a quick informal polling of membership, we were looking at maybe 2 to 3 casinos not opening with known prior restrictions. Now that number is probably more than half. So, we don't want to seem ungrateful. We don't want to seem uncooperative. But again, it's kind of like, well, you can do everything to open your business except unlock the door. So that's kind of where we find ourselves now, that, it really does push us into kind of a phase 2 consideration that, do we have any bright spots on the horizon as to when that might occur and with what kind of restrictions it may be accompanied by, because that's what these operators are going to balance against. Additionally, as we ramp up with employees, to service 25% of your positions versus 50% versus whatever, is appropriate for social distancing, really impacts the number of people we've got to call back and process and get permitted. And that's a longer timeline. So I guess our 2 questions are this: what concern is the governor's staff attempting to address through this 25% of positions restriction? And what does phase 2 look like? And prospectively, obviously no guarantees, when might it arrive?
And I can't answer the first question. The second question is, we're going to move beyond this into the first part of June. And hopefully, if the data supports lifting some of the restrictions, we'll be able to do that. So there may be short-term relief. I don't know, and I can't get ahead of the game. I can't predict where we're going to be come the end of this month and the first week in June. And the governor can't either. I mean, I'm sure he made yesterday's decision probably yesterday morning, up to the very end. Throughout the weekend, they were monitoring the data. And that's why none of this was shared until he decided yesterday. Nothing that we're doing is going to be permanent. And I realize that some businesses are going to be disadvantaged by the current restrictions that are in place if they're not eased. I understand that. I know that some truck stops may not open, some smaller video poker operations may not open, some casinos may not open. I understand the business model. That is a business decision that each of your members of your constituency will have to make. There's no, in a discussion with a casino general manager yesterday, I said, what if you just open up your slot devices and ignore the table games? And he said, well, we've looked at that, but some people are going to come just for the table games. And those are tough decisions. I can't make those choices for you or for any of the properties. It's something you're going to have to do yourself. I do know that things are going to get better. We're going to be able to lift restrictions at some point, but I don't have that date. Vincent, are you there?
While Vince is coming online, if I could jump in, I wasn't posing those questions necessarily to you because you and I had already had this discussion. I guess that was just more or less a request that as you're communicating with RLC and the governor's staff to try and garner whatever we can from those communications. But thank you, sir.
Unmute your mic, Vincent. Can't hear you, Vincent. There you go. Not yet. You're still muted. There we go. Okay. Well, for a second.
I had logged on with the phone because I was having some intermittent problems. So I hung the phone up. Now I'm on the computer. So I share the same concerns that most everyone else has mentioned, and most of us have modeled various scenarios for each of the properties. I don't think we modeled 25%. So we're kind of going back through the exercise and see, each property is different. So has a different level of profitability at that 25%. So we're going to go through the exercise and see if there is a property that we can get open and start generating some revenue, and hopefully there is some that we can get open, but certainly 25% is fairly painful overall.
Okay, Baron, where do you guys come in?
Yeah, I don't think I could add anything new. I think everybody's concerns are the same on this topic. The two big concerns are
Everybody else, please mute. Go ahead, Baron.
It's the static labor that you have to bring in. So if you are a third generation riverboat, right, those marine crews you have to bring in to get back up, and then the security crews at the same time. And then just the cash buy that you have to do to get the cash back into these buildings to make them flow. You know what I mean? So that kind of sets us apart from just being a general business. Core staffing, and then that amount of cash buy we have to do at our facilities just to get music back into the building. So those are our concerns. Obviously, just like everybody else, we're modeling it. I think we're leaning towards opening. We want to get opening. We want to get life back in these buildings. Buildings that sit idle tend to go away on you one way or the other if you don't flush the toilets and things like that. So we want to get open. We appreciate this step. We wish we weren't at that 25% limited capacity of active devices. We'll model it and we'll make it work, right? But the sooner we can get that percentage up, the happier we'll be.
Thank you. Dan?
Very similar, Mr. Chairman. The one thing I would ask is if there is an opportunity for some change, that the governor and the staff understand the urgency with which we need to work with that change. We all have modeled and staffed our teams to live in what would be a 25% world. Having that secondary restriction pop up last night was a little bit of a surprise. We plan on moving forward in the Northwest with it even in place. However, it does take some extra work and some extra labor, and also takes more devices out of play. And then you have to interact with your gaming operators, and there's just a whole bunch that goes into it that I hope they understand when they're making these decisions. But I would be remiss if I didn't say how it's great to be in phase one and have an opportunity to even debate this. And thank you for the work that you did, and you led the charge. I know it by sitting vice chair that you were the leading force. And so I'd be remiss not to say thank you for taking on the issue firsthand and getting us to at least have this debate.
Michael, you and Ned want to weigh in a little bit about charitable gaming, video bingo?
Kind of echo everybody's compliments. I mean, at 25% of the number of machines, I'd have to guess that most of them will not open at that. Ned, Trey, y'all want to voice in on that? I mean, 25% of occupancy, I think everybody was kind of okay with that to get it open. But the 25% of the number of machines, it would probably make the decision not to open right away.
That's
Trey
correct.
Tantola here.
Go ahead, Trey.
One second, Trey. We got Ned up. Go ahead,
Go
Ned.
ahead.
I agree. I totally agree. I don't think it's going to be profitable at all. This is the first I've heard of it. You know, we're gearing up. You know, everybody's sending in this open safely stuff through the fire marshal. I actually talked to an agent with the fire marshal yesterday about both locations, and he actually said that the 25% that's going to come back emailed to us is going to be more liberal than what the fire marshal would actually give occupancy on. So I don't know how that's coming about, but hey, we'll take it if that's what they're going to give us. But we were all geared up to try to get open Monday when we're filling out all this stuff, getting it in as soon as possible. And there's just no way that our industry is going to be able to survive, you know, like that. And then back to the 3-machine video poker parlors, there's, you know, it's just a moot point. There's no way we'll be opening any of that at this. So I strongly suggest that we urge the governor and his staff to reconsider to get us back to this 25% occupancy and not on these device standpoint.
Okay. Anybody else want to weigh in on this issue?
Chairman, it's Barry. I had one other thought. You know, I echo what everyone else said, and we're excited to be at phase 1. We believe that there has to be restrictions to open safely to protect our team members and our guests. We thought the 25% on occupancy would do that. I'm not sure what the 25% limitation on gaming devices does, other than put the state in a competitive disadvantage with Oklahoma, Arkansas, and Mississippi. But to Wade's point, as we move on to phase 2, if we had a clearer idea of what phase 2 looked like, it would help us greatly. So in the discussions going forward, the sooner we knew what phase 2 looked like, the better it would be for us to plan on making the experience better for the guests.
Thank you, Barry. Walter, Leisha, are you still on with us? Walter, are you there? He may be away. Would the task force be inclined to formalize its opinion on the 25% cap on gaming devices, to put it in the form of a motion to ask the RLC, based on the difficulties many of the business operations will have getting back in business at that, asking the RLC to convey to the governor's office to perhaps reconsider that cap and maintain the 25% occupancy cap that had been planned for. I'm open to suggestions.
I would suggest we do that and also ask for an articulation of what concern they're trying to address with that. You've got a lot of talented people with, you know, centuries of combined experience. If we knew what they were trying to fix, we might be able to propose a more workable alternative.
I second that.
I totally agree.
Can you just, so just for clarity purposes, Wade, would you state the motion, which we already have a second to, just so we can record it appropriately?
Certainly. My motion would be substantially along the lines of ask the RLC to revisit the issue with the governor with respect to the 25% position limitation, and additionally, to articulate as much as possible what concern is trying to be addressed through that 25% position limitation that is not achieved through the existing 25% occupancy limit for social distancing.
Okay, and Stan has seconded that. Is anyone who does not understand the motion? Is there any opposition to the motion? The motion is adopted, and I will convey that today.
Hey, Ronnie.
Yes.
Hey, this is Jade.
Hey, Jade.
Hey, how are you?
Good.
I also, I absolutely don't have, of course, any objection, but would just re-emphasize that the commission is not scheduled to meet until Friday. So you may want to just make sure that they request that commissioners get that information before Friday so that they can start reviewing it, as opposed to us just kind of picking it up as soon as we get on the call on Friday. So
thank you. Thanks for reminding me of that. I sometimes get lost in my own schedule. So I will convey that today to the leadership of the RLC and ask if they sort of fast track that to commissioners to see if it can be fast tracked to the attention of the governor's office, because ultimately that's where a decision is going to have to be made one way or the other. So thank you for that. Assuming right now that there's no change, those who you represent should know that the guidance for submitting reopening plans has been provided. It's the restrictions we have already voted on and supported to the RLC, and those reopening plans should be submitted to state police, because that's where the approval is going to be. Those operations that do want to open should be well underway at getting plans together and submitted to state police. Major McNeil, are you on? Chuck McNeil? Okay. I was going to see if he had any specific requests. So those will.
Can you hear me, Chairman?
Yes, now I can. Is there anything you want to share about that process at this point?
Yes, sir. The field lieutenants for the casino side were sent the guidelines for reopening today, and we'll be getting with the GMs and the compliance personnel. And for video poker, the guidelines were sent out through advisory, through the normal procedures to the device owners like we normally do.
Does anyone have any questions of state police before we move on?
Can I answer Stan's question earlier?
Go ahead, please.
It is, nothing has changed. It is, as it says in the proclamation, it's 25 and 25%. But of your 25% machines, they still have to be social distance that you have. So you need to let us know. That's what we're asking on the 25%. How are you going to social distance those machines? Are you moving a bank, putting a barrier, and so forth? So we need to know that. And the same thing with the casinos. Because you have 25% doesn't mean you still have to practice. You still have to practice the social distancing, and we need to know what your requirements are and how you're going to do that.
Okay.
This is Vincent Schwartz. Earlier conversations that we had talked about every other device and turning off that game. And I know with only 25% of the units being up, it might be 2 devices in between that. But in some cases, that may be very close to 6 feet. It may be a little more than 6 feet. Is turning off, I guess we had talked about, not really getting that involved with a tape measure, but is that the expectation, is that we shut down a multitude of units to create some distance between the players?
I would say yes. There has to be the distance, and again, we're not coming out with tape measures. Our stance has been, since we discussed the task force, every other machine, if it's in a row, it's sufficient. But like when I went to Stan's place in St. Helena, those carousels are more on a carousel. Those are typically more than 6 feet apart as it is. So we would not expect that to be that would not need to be shut off. That makes sense what I'm trying to say. Because
Yeah, I understand. And some of the 4-packs or a 5-pack type carousel has, more distancing between. So each floor is unique, and I do understand that. I just wanted to kind of understand what the thought process was. Thank you.
yes, sir, that's what we're thinking.
Michael, did you have something? I'm sorry.
I was just going to echo what Chuck had said about video poker and the casinos. I sent a similar letter to the to charitable gaming with all the guidelines that we had talked about before. Although the 25% machines is something new that came up this morning, I was aware of that. If that's going to stand, or we're not going to know the answer to that until Friday, that is going to be a logistics problem for charitable gaming, whether they're going to decide whether they want to open or not. But I did want to let everyone know I did send out a letter last night, or guidelines last night. But I did have 2 questions for Major McNeil. The last time we had met, we had talked about not requiring face masks on patrons. Is that still in place? We don't require them, although if the venue wants to require it, is up to them. And also not checking the temperature of patrons as they walk in, unless it's up to them.
I think that's being spelled out in both in Chairman Jones's order, but no, we're not requiring face masks for patrons, and they can wear them, but they may have to, visually remove it themselves so we can positively ID them on who they are.
And that's exactly how I stated it in my guidelines.
Yes, sir.
I want to make sure that didn't change. But this 25% of the machines, that's going to be probably a major issue for most of my video poker locations. So as soon as we can get an answer on that, that would be wonderful.
I will convey the sentiment of the task force. Well, I would say before noon, but we're at 11:10 now, so they will have it this afternoon, and I will urge them to pass along quickly. That has a lot to do with whether or not people will start filing pre-opening plans, and I'm sensitive to that. So I can't control when you will get an answer, if you get a different answer, but I will certainly carry the message forward for you today.
Very good. Thank you, Chairman.
Is
Mr.
there?
Chairman?
Yes.
Just want to clarify, Michael, you mentioned temperature checks are optional.
They're mandatory.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify that.
For workers or patrons or both?
Patrons, that's part of the entry process. Temperature checks
so
are mandatory.
Temperature checks for patrons is mandatory. Okay.
Yes, and
face mask is optional for patrons.
But we recommend in our guidelines that the face mask be offered. If someone comes in without a face mask, the business should offer them a face mask and encourage them to wear it. And if the business wants to be more restrictive and require face masks of customers, they can do that.
Correct.
Okay.
I had taken it. Thank you.
I had missed that, Dan. Thank you for bringing that up.
I missed the temperature, so it mandated.
Yes.
Workers and patrons be checked on temperature.
Yes. Yes. Dan, did you want to, as we're sort of winding down, did you want to add anything?
No, are you going to make sure that we have some public comment time? I'm not sure if we're going to fit that in today. And I just, again, I've been able to state my points earlier, and thank you for the time.
And we are near the end of our agenda. If there's anyone from the public who wishes to offer comment to the task force, we welcome to hear from you now. And I don't hear from anyone. We may have received comments on our website I'm not aware of, but if we have, they're always welcome there, and we'll make them part of the record. There being no further business, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Who made the motion?
Wade.
Wade, and second? Dan. Very good. Any opposition? Without opposition, we'll stand adjourned. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I appreciate your work and your time.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Chairman.